beautiful people, to our Tuesday night chat. We're very excited to be here tonight and to dive into tonight's topic. I'm Kelly Wilkins from My Self Reliance, and tonight we have with us Keidrych, who's going to be sharing cyberspace, how to stay safe in cyberspace, but also we're going to take this over 2 weeks. Keidrych and I had this long chat. It went for about 3 hours where I got to ask all the questions, and I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions that you're going to want to ask. So what we're doing tonight is we're going to start the conversation, and if you have more questions, you can jump into our chat room, which will not be recorded next week. So you can ask all the questions that you want nice and safely, and you'll be able to spend the evening going over all that important information with Keidrych that you're going to learn about tonight. We're going to kick that off. So welcome, Keidrych. It's good to have you here. So if you want to get along to the festival, you can find that on Humanitix. You can type in Humanitix / My Self Reliance Festival and see all that detail there, or find that on the website myselfreliance.com.au, and you'll be able to see Keidrych in person, along with all of our other great speakers. We've got James Evans from Vast Harvest coming to talk about food, and so over this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, lots of great events. So over to you, Keidrych.
All right, thanks, Kelly. So good evening, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Cyvizen. Cyvizen is an acronym. It stands for Cyber Survival Denizen, or denizen being a thing that is native to a place or an area. So it's actually about being natively able to survive in cyberspace. Cyberspace being the much larger area than the World Wide Web, which you're probably familiar with. So something like email is actually part of cyberspace, and the World Wide Web is a separate part of cyberspace. And this Cyvizen will let you expand into all of it. So it's a little bit different in that area. Please bear with me, and if I get too technical, just holler out, and I'll try and clarify as much as I can. So what's the most important thing that's happened in recent times is a thing called downfall. There's also another one called annihilation. Now, downfall is significant in the sense that it affects 9 years worth of computers, the same as annihilation. Downfall affects all of the Intel chips, like literally an Intel-made computer, and all of the AMD-made computers are affected by annihilation. Now, downfall itself is a critical weakness. In literally billions of modern processors that are used in personal and cloud computers, the processor being the very heart of your computer. Everything runs through that central piece, and it's the most, if something's wrong with it, it's the most dangerous thing to have something go wrong with. And what it allows you to do is the hardware has a fault. It's been undetected for 9 years, and it allows a user to literally access and steal data from any other user who shares the computer. But it's a little bit more significant than just any other user that shares the computer. It's visiting any website that has the code necessary to exploit this can trigger this vulnerability, which literally means you're innocent browsing along the internet like you've been doing today, and you may suddenly lose your password, your encryption keys, your banking details, emails, messages, any of your crypto wallets, without knowing. And this is the important part, is 9 years of computers are affected. So any computer prior to the 4th of January 2022 is vulnerable to this. There's no way to detect it, and any antivirus you have installed, any physical security you've installed on your computer or the manufacturer has built is bypassed. Any software is bypassed, and anything you've done. It's incredibly serious. It was talked about extensively for 3 days, and then total silence.
Keidrych,
Now
quick question.
the way to, yes.
Before you go on, the conspiracy theorists and all of us want to know, do you think that they created computers with this downfall intentionally? Was this like, it's, it was found recently, but do you think there was an intentional aspect of it? Or probably doesn't matter?
Absolutely not. No.
No.
And the reason for that is most computer technology is built on the work of one individual, a gentleman called Jim Keller. And Jim Keller, he's an incredibly brilliant man, and he changes location between Apple, Apple, Intel, and AMD regularly. So most of the things, chips in your phone, have been built by him. And because this vulnerability is widespread and in the physical hardware, it would have literally just been a mistake. And unfortunately, that mistake just happens to be an incredibly critical one that we've tried to address several times in the past, and all of those addresses have now been shown to be useless in the face of downfall. So I don't believe it was a deliberate thing. I do believe the manufacturers have been a little sneaky in the sense that they released hardware that fixes this problem prior to it going public. So they must have known about it or suspected it and just quietly fixed it, hoping it would not be discovered before it was discovered. But that's my personal opinion. Obviously, don't hold that. Did that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that.
So I'm going to describe a little bit more detail in terms of understanding the impact of this to you. The average Australian earns about $45,000 a year. That's the government statistics on average. And the car purchase statistics say that we spend half of our annual salary buying a car. Now, if anyone in the room doesn't have insurance on their car and doesn't lock it, even when it's in their driveway, it's probably a good point to put your hand up. But I think it's safe to say most people would take out insurance on something that's half of their annual salary and want to make sure that thing is protected most of the time. And the statistics also show every 11 minutes a car is stolen somewhere in Australia. Your computer is a different story because your computer literally has $50,000 plus value on it. And this is something to just get your head around, and I'll mention it a little bit later too. But your computer is actually worth twice your car. And if you've got an expensive car, then just your computer, the data you have on your computer is worth twice that number, whatever your car you purchased it for, at a minimum of 50,000 Australian dollars. But we don't have insurance on it, and with downfall now, you can't lock it even if you want to. That's how serious this is. So the only way to secure a computer that's more than 2 years old is to physically disconnect it from the internet and not let anyone else use it. And I'm not trying to do that to scare anyone. That's just the level of exposure this has shown to the market. So the way to fix it is to buy new hardware. Anything that's 12th generation will be, or basically 12th generation was released on the 4th of January 2022, is completely immune to downfall. There's no problems with it at all. Or you can install the microcode patch. Now, what the microcode patch does is it disables the hardware. And the particular piece of hardware that's vulnerable affects 50% of your processing. So we see that Microsoft actually force patched us. They went to all of the flagship computers. These are the people who have spent the most money on a computer in recent times, and they forced them, without their consent, to upgrade and protect against downfall. This is important to understand that Microsoft ignored everyone else. They just went to their premium customers who spent the most money and said, we'll make you safe. Everybody else was ignored. And so the operating system vendor has now shown that they don't care about the bulk of their customers. And then within 2 weeks, Microsoft was forced by these same people who were complaining that the computers were running so slow to provide instructions to disable downfall entirely. So they would rather have the computer dangerously unsafe than basically go back 50% in speed. It's to understand that contextually. If you remember what it was like to use a computer 10 years ago, applying a downfall patch pretty much takes you back to that point in time or very close to it. So your computer may be frustratingly slow if you tried to fix it. So what Cyvizen does is, Cyvizen is an OEM manufacturer, We always ship the latest hardware. We generally get new hardware within about 2 weeks of when it's released around the world. So we're currently on the 13th generation Intel CPU, and we're immune to downfall because anything 12 plus is immune. So we do have an actual real answer today to solve this dilemma. And as I mentioned, this dilemma was talked about extensively for 3 days after it was initially published, and then everybody went silent because the general understanding is when you have a problem and there's a solution to it, people like to talk about it. When you have a massive problem where there's no solution, or the solution is literally throw away and buy again, it's panic stage, and the media can't talk about something that would cause mass panic just by nature. So it was talked about for 3 days, and those that didn't subscribe to wanting to be interested in their computer's life cycle didn't find out. So don't feel bad if you haven't heard about it so far. I'm just going to take a little detour and talk about Cyvizen's hardware just in a bit more detail here. So Cyvizen is an Ultrabook. I'm using it at the moment. It's made from magnesium alloy. It is military hardened, so it's a very tough type of machine. It's 950 grams, so it literally falls into the Ultrabook. And if you're wanting to fly, it's under that 1 kilo minimum. You must shut the device down and stow it requirement. You can disconnect the camera. It has a software disconnect, which disables the power from the USB. Battery works all day, and there's a backlit keyboard. And we ship it with a 3-year warranty because we really want to show you that we stand behind our own hardware. I've personally been using this hardware for about 10 years now, and the previous model of it for another 10 before that. So it's the latest graphics. It is an i7 12-meg cache with 10 cores, 14-inch screen, full 2K. We ship it with 40 gig of RAM, and this is the latest RAM available on the market, the DDR5 series. We ship it with 1 terabyte of storage, but you've got 2 storage slots, and you can upgrade it to a full 16 terabytes if you wanted to. And it's got the latest Wi-Fi and the latest Bluetooth standards here. Is 1 USB-C port, 2 USB-As, a standard headphone jack, a headset jack, and Kensington lock. Kensington lock is pretty rare. That's the physical padlock you can plug in. So if you're traveling, you can wrap a cable around a table or something solid and stop people from grabbing your computer and running away from it, which is pretty handy considering how much I travel. And then there's a micro SD as well. We do that whole bundle for $3,223, and you can just go to that link and pick it up from there. So the next thing I wanted to cover is there's a lot of conversation in digital identification and what's been happening here. Just before we dive into digital ID in a little bit more detail, and I know digital ID will cause a lot of questions to be asked, we need to talk about some of the language that's being used. So traditionally, we've talked about centralized ID, and most people talk about centralized servers, centralized government, centralized services from companies like Centrelink or whichever department of the government you want to go to for whatever you need there. And what we're talking about now is the need for a decentralized digital identification. Well, if you look on the left, you can see centralized, and if you look in the middle, you can see decentralized, and it kind of just looks like centralized with a bunch of lines connecting more centralized things together. So I'm not quite sure where the difference is between those two. And then on the right, we get to distributed. And I'm being a little sarcastic in saying that, but you'll see in a minute. Distributed is better than decentralized, which is better than centralized. So we haven't actually got digital ID as evolved as it should be, but we're calling it decentralized for reasons that sound good, at least from a government's perspective. To understand a bit more information on that, 99% of all companies that have www in front of their URLs, which means everything you type a URL into, is de or centralized. And I'm going to talk about decentralized and centralized as virtually the same thing because 99% of companies do this for the one purpose of owning your data. If you read their contracts, they own everything you give them, and you pay for the privilege to access your own stuff. So decentralized digital ID, as much as we're saying it's coming, it's already been done by greater than 165 governments around the world. The World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, which standardizes everything on World Wide Web, that they provide the requirements for anyone who uses World Wide Web to do that, has now standardized personal, corporate, and government adoption of a decentralized digital ID, which Microsoft released their very first version of that, and it's called Entra on the 11th of July, 2023. And then 2 weeks later, Microsoft announced that accurate location tracking is a requirement of using Entra. So you've probably talked about things like 15-minute cities. Well, Microsoft's right there saying we need high-resolution tracking to make sure you can use social media or these other platforms with your digital ID per the World Wide Web standards. Cyvizen has a different approach. We're just fundamentally different in every single way. We have a distributed, so not a centralized, not a decentralized, we're the far right picture. And I'll just flip back up to that so you can see. We are the one on the right with this great big mesh. And that's what we do. We have a decentralized, distributed digital ID. We call it Self. It's authoritative, one-way tracing. So you can use it to verify where you need to verify to meet whatever service you want to use, but it can't be backtraced to who you are. At the core of it, you're anonymous. And we're multi-factor authenticated, so we can do all of those things. We integrate with all of the W3 standards. That's not a problem for us because of the way it works. But you maintain that anonymity by default. So you're anonymous, which is how all social interaction is built by default. We like to go to meetings. We don't say our name until we like the meeting, and then we introduce ourselves. That's just how humans interact. And by default, Cyvizen allows you to return to that path, and then if you need to, you shed your anonymity for what you're after, selectively. And just reminding that's available. Now, you can survive theft. So laptops. A laptop is stolen around the world every 53 seconds. That's it. That's a fact. 57% of all identity theft comes from laptops being stolen. So it's significant. And the average cost to any individual for a laptop being stolen, even if it's a $200 laptop, is about $50,000. That's US dollars. So when I say a laptop is twice the value of your car, it really is twice the value of your car. And you need, in my view, it's very important you make sure that thing is as protected as you possibly can, because you wouldn't leave your car open, unlocked, keys in the ignition. But many people do that because they just don't understand what's on their machine and what's actually available to be done with it. Particularly if identity theft happens, that's incredibly severe because you'll start getting credit card statements for things you didn't buy. In terms of a phone is significantly higher risk. One is stolen every 4.2 seconds. The typical theft path is cash is stolen. If they can't find cash, they'll look for jewelry. If they can't find jewelry, they'll grab a phone, and then they'll grab any consumer electronics and then a laptop. So it is right up there in the top 5 things to grab. Typically, it's impossible. Now, if you've had your laptop stolen, or your laptop's failed for whatever reason, or you just wanted to upgrade to a new laptop, you can't replace it with the same machine because we keep moving on. So you're forced to use new hardware. The thing is, when you use new hardware, your backups or your transfer that you've done has no guarantee that it's going to work on that new hardware. And this is a big deal with Apple products, is Time Machine doesn't necessarily work with new hardware. And it's also impossible to replace the same operating system. If you had Windows 7 and you liked it, you're now forced to use Windows 11. You may not like it at all. It may not work, but you're forced to use it because that's what the new machines come with. So you've got no guarantee that however you saved your data is actually going to work with new hardware or new operating systems. And any of the personalization, the look and feel, the dark theme, the light theme, the little icons, the wallpapers in the background of your family photos and your kids, all of that has to be reset up. And that typically takes about 30 days from the statistics to retweak things back to the way where you felt it was a machine that was actually comfortable to how you liked it to be. Cyvizen's answer to this is we are the only operating system in existence with 100% recovery of personalization and data. That we can do online and offline recovery options. We use a dual encrypted disk, which is able to be moved between machines and erased securely without data loss. So you can literally erase your machine, delete the entire thing, or what we'd call scorched earth it, and then grab a new machine and recover from where you left off without any loss. Everything. I'm talking the colors, the fonts, everything restored to how you like to have it. And if you want to do the online option, you've got 13 physical regions in the world. So you can shop around and say, well, I actually like the legislation in that particular country. I want my data there instead of another country. And obviously, wherever it's physically hosted, those laws apply. Cyvizen itself boots within 15 seconds. So from turning it off to turning it back on, 15 seconds later, you're good to go. But it literally creates a new operating system on every boot. So there is no operating system on your machine to be breached when you turn it off. When you turn it back on, it assembles itself from nothing, unlocks all of your personal data, which is tightly secured, and automatically locks with industry standard encryption on suspend, sleep, or power off. We've actually got this, literally you can be using your computer and say someone comes up, you can just tap the power button and it will start shutting down the machine straight away and locking it up. So if you have an incident, all you got to do is slam your lids closed or push the power button and you're good. After all of that, I've got one more thing. Cyvizen is designed specifically, there's some legislation in Australia which says for any company that operates in Australia and provides IT services of any kind, if the Australian government asks, they must give user data to the Australian government, and if they're unable to do so, they must build functionality to give that data to the government. So when you build something like Cyvizen, knowing this legislation is in place, it's very important to address that and say, well, we can't do it. So we cannot administer your computer. There's no concept of admins, hidden accounts, super accounts. They don't exist. We cannot even send metadata deltas to ourselves or any governing body. What we do is provide an anonymous, secure, private, and creative platform for your cyberspace future. So you are in control of it. You're the only one who can unlock it. And when it's unlocked, it's the only place in existence where things all come together to be used. As soon as it's locked back up, everything's just shattered into pieces again. So yeah, it's about as secure as you can get in today's world. At this point, I'm going to open up to questions.
So good. I might kick off with a question or two, if that's all right, Keidrych.
Sure.
You talked about the 13 locations around the world.
Yep.
And then, you can go along with that legislation that goes along with that country. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I wasn't aware, we kind of have this idea that your data goes to the cloud and, where it's just kind of hanging out there. Had no idea that it can be like stored in a country. Can you explain that a little bit more?
All right. So the cloud is just a bunch of computers. That's all it is. They just live in a tightly secured building, and then there's telecom wires, telco fiber optic that comes in and goes back out, and that's how we access it. Because it's in secured buildings with contracts and security teams, we believe it's safer there than it would be on our own machines because machines can be stolen. Now, those physical locations are in obviously physical countries, and any business needs to comply with the legislation of the local country that it's in because that's the jurisdiction the business is under. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm not here to advise on law or legal or any of that stuff. It's the business is in that country. The business complies to the local legislation. So you may want to go, well, it may not be beneficial to you to host your data in Australia for whatever reason, or it may not be beneficial to you to host your data in the US. You might want to, knowing the local legislation on what they can do to enter, to seize, and things like that, you may wish to put them in your data in a different country and access it from there. And that's why we have the 13 different jurisdictions. The other thing there is GDPR, and what's also called the Data Sovereignty Agreement has been introduced. The Data Sovereignty Agreement says that for things like airlines, where the data has generated or where the person first registers with that airline per their passport, the data must stay in that country. It can't be sent around the world because citizens are owned by that country, or that the ID of that citizen is owned by that country. To date, it's just been, as you said, Kelly, stuck in the cloud and shoved wherever it needed to be shoved. But the governments and W3C are working together to make sure things are much more better categorized and things don't easily get lost. It's also about maintaining the security. The more you track where something is, the easier it is to monitor and make sure that thing doesn't escape.
Thank you. That was, yeah, much more clear. And then my other question was, you said you can't provide the government with that metadata that they say that they require. So how are you able to get around that, knowing that you can't provide it, and they still let you do business?
They can ask. It's literally they can ask, but there's no ability to do it. It's specifically designed so when it's locked up, it's locked up. The only way would be to physically break that open, and to physically break that open, they've got to throw some pretty advanced technology at it, or they have to get the password or the keys from you. No one else has those. No one else has that ability to do it, and we've designed it that way for that reason.
So the next obvious question is, if you forget your password, like we all do from time to time, how do you go about recovering your own password?
So Cyvizen, because it's got to cover different risk profiles people have, and everyone has a different view on what their security level is and what their safety is, because safety and security synonymously go together, as well as like shelter and food and things like that. So you can have no password recovery. That you can turn it off if you want to. You can also do a question and answer password recovery, which we do a proof of work token. So it's not you can't brute force that quickly. It would take a significant amount of time to break someone's passphrase or to figure out their question and answers. And the other option that we offer is if you wish to work with support and you're just like, I just need help all the time, then we can do what's called a one-time password with support. So you would register with support, you'd contact them, they would help verify you, and then they would send you a token which would only work on your actual Cyvizen machine. It wouldn't work on someone else's. And that will help you recover your password. And the final option is what's called Shamir's shared secrets, which is perfect security. The reason it's called perfect security is because we would take your password recovery, we would break it into pieces, and then you would take those pieces and distribute each piece to people that you trusted. And you would set a minimum threshold to that. So you may literally say, and the best way is the people you give them to don't know each other. So you may literally go, oh, I've got 5 pieces, my password's cut into 5 pieces. I would need to recover 3 of them to actually show my password. And until those 3 pieces come together, there's no way of recovering that password. So it's called perfect security in the sense that until that happens, no one can recover it. So you stay in control.
Set your own adventure, guys. You can set your own in case anything happens to me, then you have to track down this adventure to be able to get my password to have my data from my Cyvizen computer. I love that.
Absolutely. And that's actually something that we're working on and now is actually estate planning using that technology. So we're looking to find a way we can do this that's not interruptive or preventative, where you can do things like take your will and break your will into pieces, because most people have crypto on their computers today. And if you've got some form of cryptocurrency, you now go, well, if I died, how do I pass that to my kids? But if I pass it to my kids now, like the password to my computer, how do I stop elder abuse where they just go and take my money? So this kind of perfect secrecy thing allows us to do things like wills, maintain pieces of contracts with, like if you had a solicitor, they could have a piece and it could be the last piece to unlock your password and all that kind of stuff. But it literally is, as you described it, choose your own adventure.
Can you go back to the screen that has your link on it there, Keidrych? Beautiful. Yes. And everyone can take a screenshot of that.
I have a suspicion the marketing department may not have got that link turned on tonight, but it would be available tomorrow about lunchtime if that's the case.
Great. So someone was just saying in the chat that they tried that
Ah,
link. So can you answer some of the other
I
questions?
deeply apologize. I will go annoy someone in marketing and make sure that that link is updated, because it was original. But you can go right now to you can, yeah. I'll get it sorted by lunchtime tomorrow. I promise that.
All right, I'll let you go through. Maybe if you want to start reading through some of those questions and then answer the ones that you think covers off
Sure.
the big topics first.
So the patch is the same as Intel. And it's slowed down 50%. That's basically the problem with it. And if you're not experiencing that slowdown, you're not patched. It's no. So Cyvizen ships with 95 pieces of bundled software to target every basic use case of a computer. So you can do. We've even got the ability to build computer games on Cyvizen. So it's got your full Office suite. We use LibreOffice for that. Way upstream, Cyvizen does use some Linux technology. So it's reusing what's open source and trusted and used in servers, but it is a different beast. It's not one-to-one swappable with any other Linux. It's because it prints itself. So every time you make a change to Cyvizen, the best way to describe it would be like if you worked in your own car. Your results may vary depending on your skill level and if you've had some alcohol or things the night before. But if you 3D printed a brand new car every time you worked on it, you can try it and then go back to the old one. So you can literally roll Cyvizen forward or backwards. If you adjusted things like your mirror in a car and then didn't like it, rather than change it back, you just go back to the old car.
There's lots of questions on there, but maybe doing a demo might answer some of the questions too. So we have time for that.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome, Gail.
If I can share the
So
screen.
can you share the screen?
I'm trying.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, there you go. This is cool.
So this is Cyvizen, and effectively this is how it looks. It's very clean. We deliberately make it very clean because with Cyvizen you have a conversation. So this is the one shift in operation. So if you wanted to do write, you would just start typing write, and you tell Cyvizen what you want it to do as opposed to looking and hunting for icons. But if you wanted to look and hunt for icons, they're still here. So you can just click down the bottom right and they're available. And you can see there's 96 pieces of software here for your use. So if I was to say I wanted to write something, I just go write, and this is LibreOffice. That's going to fire up here. So that's pretty much normal. If you're familiar with the older way Office used to run, you'll be right at home using LibreOffice. LibreOffice is one-to-one compatible with the latest versions of Microsoft Office, so it doesn't really matter whether you're using Microsoft Office or your friends are using Microsoft Office. You can use this and work with it. The other thing we have is we've got Keidrych, and you've got Cyvizen here, so you can run Cyvizen directly, or you can run it from the terminal. The one thing I want to show off is Cyvizen has the ability to work with 90,000 pieces of software, and it's actually growing. It's a growing list. So you can just type Cyvizen, and it brings up all of that software here. So if we wanted to do something like PDF, we can just type PDF. We go, oh look, there's PDF Quench. Yeah, that's a visual tool for cropping PDF files. That sounds like it's something that I'd like to use. We can just select that, and now it tells us all the good stuff. And it tells us what it is, the homepage for it, if we wanted to click on that and see more information. And we get to see things like the license. Is it free? Yes, it is. Well, that's great. That fits my budget. It's a general public license, so you can choose. If you start becoming familiar with the different types of licenses, you can choose ones that meet your choice as to what you wish to interact with. And you can see the URL for that license as well. and you can see his version. And then you can come here and go, yep, I'm actually happy with that. And now you can attempt to execute it. Now this is unique to Cyvizen. What I'm doing now is I'm downloading and running this software without installing it. This is PDF Quench. There it is. It's running. It's not installed on this computer in any way, shape, or form. Not at all. It's just running, so you may try it without any harm. And as soon as I close it down, it's now gone. It's been erased. It's gone from the computer. So I don't have to worry about going to Google and searching in Google for PDF and getting hundreds of results and going, oh my God, which one do I try? And then going, I've tried it, and I hope the uninstall works and it hasn't left anything behind to mess my computer up. That's one of the massive powers of Cyvizen.
So once you work on that document and you saved it, though, would it be then saved and stored on your computer, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if we go to files, all of your standard places are here. Your documents, downloads, music, pictures, videos, all of those, anything you put in those directories will automatically save. And you can customize Cyvizen by telling it, these are additional directories that I need to save. You can actually see a full list at all times. So we can, in this case, we go Cyvizen unsaved, and this shows me in detail all files that will be erased when I reboot that aren't persisted. So I can see here that Zoom has a bunch of tracking files that it's added that as soon as I reboot this computer will be erased. I don't have to worry about them. They'll just be gone. But it's good to know they're there.
You got some questions coming through the chat, and this is really good for our techies in the room who like to know all the behind the scenes. I don't know at this point whether someone like me might just go, yeah, a bit over my head, but I understand where you're coming from with all those tracking, and it's good to know that they're not going to follow you around and you don't have to store things on your computer that take up space, that just because someone's using Microsoft Teams and they want you to use it and then you don't want it on your computer, but you have to because they're using it. That's all gone when you're finished with it. So that's really cool. But going back
I'll just
to
try working my way through the questions.
Yes,
if
please.
that's all right.
Yeah.
So Cyvizen's jurisdiction is actually, it's an internet company. It doesn't have a particular country that it's bound to. And we're working very carefully to make sure that it can stay that way. So when we interact with a country, we're basically talking to them saying, what taxes do you want us to pay to accept your currency? We are trying to work with different governments to maintain the ethos and to set up a full head office that will allow us to do manufacturing more locally. We do manufacture the machines in Australia, so they're fully assembled here in WA, and they're shipped directly from WA to you. So you have local physical hardware support on this continent, as opposed to having to wait and send them overseas at crazy shipping prices. I'm going to skip the question on VPNs. We can talk about that another time, should we need to. I don't mean to be rude there. Yes, Apple MacBooks are affected. Everybody's affected. If you've got an Intel chip in your MacBook, you're affected. If you've got one that's on an M series, we don't know yet. Mostly because still less than 10% of the population use Mac versus the thousands and millions. There's actually 5.8 billion computers, users of computers at the moment. So 10% of that is still big, but it's small compared to things like Intel and AMD users. You can migrate your iMac. You can migrate anything that's not .pages. You can lift the files and move them across. Most things are compatible. So if you're talking like Office files and videos, they're fine. Cyvizen actually ships with audio converters and video converters, which will allow you to convert files and videos into any format you want to. It also ships with compressors that will allow you to compress your audio, photos, so that they don't take up as much space on your hard drive, but it's lossless compression, so you don't actually lose any quality. So we don't use sudo at all. Sudo doesn't exist on our machines. Cyvizen has its own update cycle. And it's got its own upgrade cycle. We offer updates and upgrades for free. There's no cost on any of those, and we're doing that for life. So as soon as they come out, effectively when you use Cyvizen, it'll say there's an upgrade or an update available, and you can just download and install that. And if it's an upgrade, it's a little bit they're bigger changes, so there'll be steps to do with those, whereas updates come through quite easily. Yes, the apps. So the apps will work if you use them while you were online to start with, and within 24 hours of you using it once while you're online, it cleans itself up every 24 hours to make sure that there's nothing left behind. So you would need to be back online to actually get those apps working again if they're not installed on the machine. But you can also set them to be part of your machine. Like Zoom is by default not part of Cyvizen. I've tagged it as add Zoom to Cyvizen, and now it's permanently part of my machine whenever I turn it on, and that'll follow me around on every Cyvizen I ever use. And then I can remove that as well. I just delete the line, and it's gone. I would need to look more into the identity and disrupt bill. I'm not an expert on everything, so I can say that Cyvizen's anonymity is pretty good in terms of how it handles tracing and backtracing. The documents and files can be stored in any. So you have your ability they're stored on the computer in a locked vault. They lock up as soon as you put the computer to sleep or turn off one of those things. You can back it up to an external hard drive, which is encrypted. It's actually dual key encrypted. So you would type your passphrase to encrypt it, and Cyvizen, the network, generates another passphrase which you don't know and no one else knows to provide the second stage of that. So you wouldn't be able to restore it on a separate machine without permissions. Effectively, it makes it very difficult for someone to break it. But as long as you're using your Cyvizen, you're good to go. But that doesn't stop you from restoring it to another Cyvizen if you wish to restore to another Cyvizen. You can also store them in the cloud if you wanted to, in one of those 13 regions. There are no other devices available with Cyvizen at this time. The MetaBox has a huge range of machines. We're partnered with them as the local distributor of our install. They pre-install it. They take care of all the warranty that's physical. This machine is unique in its hardware, so we're using that. It's also had 20 years of runtime. It's had 10 years of the previous model being used by IT professionals who primarily work in data centers. So it's robust, it's tough, it can take a few knocks. This is the next generation of it, and we will introduce other Cyvizens down the track, but for now, this is the only one we're supporting. I wish I could help you with your audio. There is no ability to test the OS in a VM. That's not possible. It wraps around the actual hardware of your machine. So if you've installed Windows, and if you've ever tried to uninstall Windows, you'll notice Windows integrates very, very deeply to the point that you may actually break it by removing Windows. And I've tested this with one of the, I will not say the manufacturer's name for good reasons, but I have removed Windows off a computer previously, and it bricked the machine as soon as we put Linux on it, or some other type of operating system. So Cyvizen needs to be installed on a clean machine that's got no operating system on it. It will bury itself into the hardware, and it does that so that it can track and maintain all of its security pieces and make sure that it's not compromised. There is no other thing that is able to do what Cyvizen does. No. Sorry, Rob. There's plenty of talk about certain people's operating systems that they have passions for, but they don't do this level. They just don't.
So you're pretty much unique in the market.
We are unique in the market, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I originally developed this tech in 2016, and I've road tested it. I've been 1,000 hours in the air all over Eastern Asia. I've had several computers fail or from just excessive use. Some went underwater. Computers generally, and these ones the same, don't like being underwater.
Yep.
And I've just come back, grabbed a new machine, and within an hour I've been up and running again without any actual loss.
How would you know the machine was
So
compromised if someone was able to actually crack and get into it? Would there be some sort of diagnostic ability to flag and let you know that that has happened?
I'm working on that. We're working on that in great detail. So
Mm.
it's not an easy thing to do. To even get into Cyvizen, if you've forgotten your password, is pretty darn hard, because the technology we're using is actually a hardware generation for security. So as the hardware gets faster, so even if you were to get a new machine down the track, Cyvizen would re-baseline itself to the complexity of that machine for its
Yeah,
algorithms, and
I'm thinking
maintain the
more along.
complexity to break it.
I'm just thinking more along the lines of AI and how intelligent that's getting. And you can imagine that bloody thing running day and night till it tries to crack it open. What sort of safeguards do you put there?
So the weakness there is going to be your password recovery. And if you've done like security questions and answers, it can do AI can do an analysis of you and go, I think I can guess that question. But there's still proof of work required for each time they do that. So there is a physical slowdown. Every time you answer those questions, it gets slower, and they can't escape that wait time, because
Right.
it's got to do the mathematical calculation. So it's brute force ultimately will always work if you're running short passwords or things like that. We do work with only keys, and we're working to try and get a partnership with them so we can get them brought into Australia, which is all your FIDO2 compliance and much more security. So you can insert a physical device, type a PIN code on it, and that will unlock your machine.
So
But
is it
they're having
provisioned if
some
you,
supply issues.
I hear you, is it provisioned, for example, if you were to put your password in wrong once or twice, they would lock it out for a predetermined time, so absolutely nobody could get
No,
into it?
and not at this time. We're having discussions as to whether that's a worthwhile feature or not. There's
Mm.
a lot of very unique cases that different people have. At this point, we're targeting the general keep me safe, because
Mm-hmm.
baseline safety is the most important thing, and then there's people have their different levels above that they would like to be. So
So,
at this point, it just goes passwords incorrect, passwords incorrect.
so in a perfect world, what would be the ultimate feature that you would showcase in this particular model?
In a perfect world, I would use the only keys, which we can support now, as
Mm.
ECDH keys, elliptic curve keys that match up. We also use the trusted protection module within the machine itself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a encrypted communication back and forth. We wrap it, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy to get into that. You can't open the back and listen to the TPM and go, oh, there's the password.
So in layman's terms, how does this compare to a blockchain?
Blockchain's nothing like this. Blockchain is a World Wide Web technology.
Yep.
It's designed by World Wide Web. It's been made quite public that it is World Wide Web that made it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to try and put it into layman's terms, if you look at the companies that do massive planet scale stuff and they don't go down, and how do they maintain their own safety and security? That's been downscaled to work in a laptop,
Right.
as a layman's terms, but it's much more than that. It is a lot more than that.
I'm just thinking where the blockchain, there's 31 different computers that have to speak to each other before something can happen. It's all over and there's little bits everywhere. Um, is that something that you can incorporate in? Um,
Cyvizen has a network that it runs in the background. It's an incredibly powerful network, and it literally eats blockchain for breakfast. And
right.
the guy Satoshi, who worked on blockchain, specifically Bitcoin, until 2011, where it went a different direction. He then went to Google and worked on Google's coin until 2014, where it went the wrong direction, as one of the major contributors to this technology. And we've then taken that and upgraded it even further. So it's offline first, distributed, peer-to-peer replicated, encrypted in multiple zones, and able to rebuild itself. It's a technology that's designed at a scale that if the internet was to fail worldwide, it would be able to recover accurately all the pieces and check for corruption. It's
So it's an
incredibly cool
intrinsic
tech,
part of.
and
So it's an
that's an
intrinsic part of the.
Cyvizen.
Okay, now I understand what's happening. All good.
The Cyvizen,
So it's a one-stop shop, basically.
Cyvizen, yes. So there's a huge amount of stuff that will be coming in Cyvizen as introduced, where we can change because it's cyberspace it works in. It doesn't have the rules of the World Wide Web to restrain it. So there's some very powerful conversations, but I didn't want to distract by getting into those. I wanted to stay focused on here's an option, because right now we don't have an alternative, but there is an alternative.
Yeah. So let's fast forward 5 years from now. What can you see different with Cyvizen? What would be a really nice feature to have?
Okay, let's give a really simple example. A really simple example would be right now you go to Gumtree and say you want to buy a kitten. So you go, Gumtree, I want a kitten. And then you go and look at everyone's pictures and photos and all the rest. And you go, oh my gosh, there's so many things. You reach out and you start contacting people. Well, who owns all your data? Gumtree. That's not ideal. So in Cyvizen, you could do the same thing anonymously, but this is where things change. Right now, we have an entire industry built on retargeting and advertising. So your keywords are massively important in this industry. So say you were a breeder, or someone else was a breeder of kittens, they can go, here's a litter of kittens. Or on this date, it'll come, here's the parents, and they can put that all up into the Cyvizen network. And then when you come along and you go, I'd like a kitten, I'd like to share my location so that I don't get searches from all around the world. And these are the specifications. Then Cyvizen can grab that, run out to people that match that, and then get them to contact you, all maintaining your anonymity. So you have an entirely different way of conducting business. And you can choose to put that on a fixed time frame. After that, it's gone. Or you can choose to do things like shed the rest of your anonymity and actually meet people to buy the kitten. So there's an incredible amount of power in understanding just that little shift.
So just to be aware, we only have 4 minutes left, Keidrych, before you need to make a run for your plane. So if there's any other
Kelly.
questions that are that you need to answer tonight, otherwise we will be back next week and you'll be able to ask more questions if you'd like, or unpack some more conversation around it.
Thank you very much. Very thorough. Cheers.
Thanks, Rob.
The GPS location data, where we can, we've turned it off. I'm just going to keep going until I run out of time, if everyone's happy with that.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yes, please.
Or tell me to go away. So the GPS location data, everything's been turned off by default. Like even we use LibreWolf, which is a privacy upgraded version of Firefox. It's basically Firefox with every single privacy thing turned on. And then we turn off some of those to increase your anonymity, because we're balancing the opposing forces of privacy and anonymity. That's not to say you can't do things that will shed those, but it gives you a starting point as a platform, which we don't have today. You can just copy your files from Windows, the same as Mac.
Sorry,
go for it.
can I just ask a question? So let's say your laptop was stolen because you didn't hook it up to something, right? How would you recover that? I mean, even if they can't get in, it's still lost to you. So how do you get your stuff back?
So you would have maintained, if you were doing the offline version, you'd have a backup that you've got, and hopefully your backup is not with your laptop. It should be multiple backups in different locations. Or if you've gone with the online option, you can do both. You don't have, it's not one or the other. Then you can just put in get your new Cyvizen and recover from that online data.
And conspiracy theory, so if the whole net goes down, we'll still be able to operate?
Cyvizen's network will recover from the net going down. It's designed that way. It's literally designed as a freedom-based network, and it's been proven to do that.
Oh, now you're talking.
So how many can we order at once?
No bold statements, but it could be possible to build some sort of gold-backed coin that works on this network that allows countries, the internet to fail, and then different locations and countries to recover locally, and then still reconcile everything as the country comes back online. And that is not outside of Cyvizen's reach. Just not available at this time, and I don't want to talk about that too much.
So
But
the best way for people to go about getting a Ultrabook is to go directly through you, or are you looking to employ people in your company?
So we have the ability to do direct sales. So David did the introduction to you, Kelly. So it would be worth talking to David about remuneration options and what things could be done there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the choice to go through an introducer, I would say use the introducer, because ultimately, you know, people need to be rewarded for their effort, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk here. So let's have those conversations, and if you want to, whatever models you want to set up, we're just the manufacturer. We have an allocation that is put aside for direct sales to work, because we're focused on getting this into everyone's hands as fast as possible, and there's no better way of doing that than saying, well, you can refer, and here's some ability to actually, you know, law of equitable exchange. Things must be done fairly.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Did that answer that appropriately?
It did, and even though I kind of know the answer to that, I wanted to put it out there in case other people are wanting to take up that offer as well. So do we feel like, I want to put it out to the group, do you feel like you need another week talking about all of this information, where you could invite somebody else to jump on who's not here tonight? Would you like to? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of yeses come through.
Yes, please.
So let's do that. So next week, we'll have this conversation with Keidrych, and if you want to invite someone onto it, it will be a non-recorded meeting. So you can go ahead and ask all the deep questions. I know there was a question there about, can we get this on a phone? It's not on a phone yet, is it? And because that's one
correct,
of my questions. We all want
phones are a whole different beast.
They're a whole different ball game. So we're not going there yet.
To tell you roughly, you can do 70% more protection on a computer than you can on a phone.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's really good to know. So that's what we'll do. We'll jump back on this same channel, same time next week, and you'll be able to invite whoever you want to come on and ask the questions. So not iPads at this moment, because this Ultrabook is the one unit that's being sold. There's a nice question from DT on Graphene OS. I
can talk about that next week.
Yeah,
please ask it again then.
So Keidrych has to run to take a flight. So thank you so much for joining us, Keidrych, and for you, the way I just marvel at the way that your brain works to be able to have created something like this. So thank you, and thank you for bringing it to My Self Reliance. We thank David for introducing us, and we're really feeling blessed and privileged to be able to hear about it directly from the guy who created it. So normally you don't get this connection, right, with someone who is at the creation end. You normally get to talk to the guy a few steps down from that. But we are really blessed tonight to have Keidrych in the room, and his amazing, you know, that computer of a brain that he has to be able to work out all these things. So I know that it's been brilliant from everyone who is a novice like myself to the techies in the room. And we really thank you tonight, Keidrych, and all the best in your flight. Happy landing.
Thank you.
Good night, and we'll see you
All right,
next week.
Thanks again. Good night.
See ya. Thank you.
So I won't be here next week, so we will have someone else host for you, as I will be away. But as you can see, it's been a brilliant call, and I'm sure you'll have many more questions that you want to throw at Keidrych next week. So we will be back the week after, or I will be back the week after, and we'll be talking about a machine that is a health device that works on frequency to detox your body of all those heavy metals. So if that's of interest to you, and you want to learn about how you can detox from heavy metals using a frequency, then we'll be back the week after with that. So with that, good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.